Thank you so much for joining us for this Friday's edition of Alaska Weather. I'm Dave Percy, a meteorologist with the National Weather Service, and I'll be hosting today's show. Up first on the hazardous weather graphic, got the coastal flood warning out for the central Arctic coast here, but that's only out for a few more hours due to expire at 6 p.m. this evening, Friday evening, up there, and as conditions improve and threat of coastal flooding will be gone. Winter weather advisory continues for tonight here, St. Lawrence Island, Bering Strait coast for several more inches of snow and gusty winds as that front pushes up into the area. They're already gusting over 40 miles an hour, both at Savunga and Gamble at mid-afternoon Friday today. And snow should be on the increase, light snow occurring with that, but that should increase here this evening. And also pushing in along the Yukon Delta coast, winds 30 to 40 miles an hour this afternoon, and snow pushing into mainly Nunivak Island, just reaching the coast at this time. And so we got winter weather advisory out tonight for the Yukon Delta. Winter storm warning continues for the greater Tanana area here in the central interior until 3 p.m. Saturday. And winter weather advisory continues for the upper Yukon Valley until 3 p.m. Saturday, also for the greater Fairbanks area in the under the influence of a winter weather advisory, all due to the continued snowfall in that area. And also winter weather advisory here for the Alaska Range until 6 a.m. tomorrow, I believe, here for the east side, and then 9 p.m. this evening for the west side there over the northern Kuskokwim Valley areas. And moving on to satellite imagery, you can see moisture that was not as enhanced and as significant as it was yesterday with the heavy precipitation that came in, but still got snow going on from the Eastern Brooks Range here, upper Yukon Valley southward into the Alaska Range, northern Kuskokwim Valley areas, and also the heavier in the northern Kuskokwim extending down in towards Sparrowvon, western Alaska Range, and then kind of a mixture of rain or snow as you get down in toward Kodiak Island. They picked up about half an inch today, water equivalent there at Kodiak. And North Gulf Coast, not as much wind, not as much rain, but still a wet day there. And looks like a lot of clouds spread into the Panhandle today from south to north there as this weakening frontal boundary began to approach the area. A little bit of a break here from the north slope in the northwest part of the state. Pretty narrow through here. This mostly just mid and high level clouds coming into the southwest with the main precipitation producing clouds right along the coast now, and then back to the west, front pushing through the Pribilof Islands. They had rain earlier there, rain for the eastern Aleutians, getting into the more showery conditions and lighter amounts there. And basically high pressure at the surface here over the Aleutians today with not much going on, but you can see the cloud shield with the next system, mid and high level clouds pushing up to Adak. And rolling that through once again, you can see another batch of cold air coming out of the Russian Far East here, and that's going to drop snowfall levels down to sea level over the next couple of days, all the way down into the Aleutians again as that continues to wrap into the area. And for the chart today, there's about roughly the position of the front, weakening quite a bit, especially in the southern quadrant here, with the strongest winds up to the north, coming into the northern Bering Sea, St. Lawrence Island, to a lesser extent Yukon Delta coast. Weak high pressure ridge here, almost getting pinched off due to this nearly stationary but weakening frontal boundary here across south central Alaska, angling back to the northeast there. Rain continued North Gulf Coast, and here's this area of snow with a winter storm warning and advisories out in that area for tonight into tomorrow. And pretty light though up over the eastern north slope areas, about 200s water equivalent at the Barrow area today, but that was about it as far as any light snow up there goes. And rainfall amounts not all that significant here for the North Gulf Coast. As I mentioned, Kodiak did pick up about 0.4 of an inch during the day today. And McGrath had about 2 to 4 inches of snow actually in the northern Kuskokwim Valley as well. And for tonight, see that what was this small low pressure area here tonight that tracks northward and kind of troughs out here Still have a very weak now occluded front there, keeping it wet, but not just periods of light rain, more intermittent for the North Gulf Coast. Dry for Kodiak tonight in between, and but more precipitation making its way to the southwest coast by late tonight and early tomorrow. And then this front pushes inland with light snow. Again, the snow advisory, snow blowing snow. Visibility is possibly down to a half mile at times here over the Yukon Delta, Nunivak Island this evening, but improving later tonight for Nunivak Island, and then that advisory up to St. Lawrence Island. A break here in the farther out for the Kotzebue Sound northwest coast area, and the snowfall continues here with the central interior, back to the Koyukuk Valley, up to the Brooks Range, and then eastward across the upper Yukon Valley. With the Panhandle just seeing generally cloudy skies, a break coming into the eastern Aleutians. Another system there south of the Adak-Atka area, that'll spread some rain up into the area tonight, and then tomorrow that tracks northeastward, very close to the Fox Islands, so rain, but the winds, the strongest winds with this system are going to be to the south there, with a low center so close to the area there, so the very strong winds will be well south of the zone, and weak high pressure, drier over the southwest interior, periods of snow up over the central interior, back across the Seward Peninsula, Kotzebue Sound, Selawik Valley areas, up into the upper Yukon Valley, the eastern Brooks Range. Very weak low here right off the southeast coast. Chance of rain on the north coast, that's about it. Although that'll be, some of that could actually spread into the extreme northern panhandle tomorrow afternoon, and then just dry to the south. And this trough coming across will be pushing snow in across, probably making its way into northern Cook Inlet as early as tomorrow afternoon in the Susitna Valley, and then eventually the Matanuska Valley, and then that will pull out as that next storm here, kind of this one, takes a track right up to the northeast to this position on Sunday afternoon, with a pretty good chance of snow coming across Cook Inlet and south central Alaska, and then a mix Turnagain Arm, Kenai Peninsula to just rain for the North Gulf Coast, moderate to heavy rain Cordova into the northern panhandle, and snow showers and breezy and colder out over the Bering Sea to the Aleutians, and light snow up along the Arctic coast. Well, it's tonight up that way, single numbers here, generally a little below 0 to 5 below here on the eastern coast. Otherwise, single numbers all the way down into the Kuskokwim Valley there, with lower 20s along the southwest coast, upper 20s for the Pribilofs, lower 30s southern Alaska, and in the 30s for the Panhandle. Some areas maybe a little cooler. Highs tomorrow, mid-30s to mid-40s for the southeast coast. We've got 10 to 15 for the northern interior out to the Arctic coast, 15 to 20 here over the southwest interior, 40s for the Alaska Peninsula, mid-30s south central Alaska, 41 for Kodiak. Lows the following morning, single numbers from the central interior there up to the Arctic coast. Otherwise much milder, 30 to 35 southern Alaska, followed by highs in the 35 to 40 degrees range south and lower teens.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
First line weather graphic here Saturday morning. Front coming into the west coast here, so a narrow band of IFR along with it, breaking out the VFR behind the front, Nunivak Island on up to Savunga and Gamble. Marginal VFR for the Pribilofs, IFR here central Aleutians, and another zone of IFR here from the western Gulf of Alaska, Kodiak Island, up into Cook Inlet and the Susitna Valley, up to the Alaska Range. A little bit IFR up here over the northeast interior, and VFR eastern Copper River Basin, Wrangell Mountains, and VFR southern Panhandle, kind of marginal up to the north. And for the afternoon there, pretty much VFR for the southeast coast, except for the north coast with marginal VFR, IFR North Gulf Coast into Prince William Sound, right on up into the Brooks Range there, some VFR back to the southwest, as behind that trough swinging through, and so there'll be some improving in the afternoon down in this area, and then some more IFR there, Alaska Peninsula to about Atka. And for Sunday morning, we've got a zone of IFR up here over the north slope. Otherwise, VFR here from the Alaska Range and most of the Kuskokwim Valley out to the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta. But the coastal areas of the Yukon Delta, mostly IFR, right up across Norton Sound to the south side of the Seward Peninsula. Marginal VFR in the Bering Sea, and marginal along the Aleutians with some VFR trying to show up in some areas. IFR here, Bristol Bay, Alaska Peninsula, Kodiak Island, all the Gulf, right up to the North Gulf Coast, Prince William Sound, northward there to the across the west central Copper River Basin to the Alaska Range, IFR in over the northern southeast coast, marginal VFR on down to Dixon Entrance. And then for Sunday afternoon, solid IFR there for the Panhandle, eastern Gulf of Alaska, right on up here into the eastern interior, and then you get up around the Brooks Range. North Slope, not too bad, mostly VFR there. Even the Arctic coast, just some marginal VFR kind of skipping along the east side there in the central coast, but marginal VFR for the Noatak Valley, Kivalina, Kotzebue, most of the Seward Peninsula, south side IFR of the peninsula there, on down across Kuskokwim Bay, marginal for the Pribilofs, and still some VFR over areas of the Aleutians. Passes tomorrow, Anaktuvik, split the difference here. Anaktuvik will go IFR, Adigan, marginal, and for Lake Clark and Merrill, IFR as a trough pulls off to the east and northeast, going VFR in the afternoon, and rainy lowest conditions in the morning, better, much better in the latter part of the afternoon. Windy, marginal VFR becoming IFR there as that trough a little more effective up in that area. And Isabel, marginal becoming IFR, and Mentasta though, escaping it, staying VFR once again. And for Tanita, VFR possibly becoming marginal at times, and for Portage, IFR, and Chilcoot and White, VFR, turning toward marginal during the latter part of the afternoon. Freezing levels here, 2,000 feet south of the eastern Aleutians, a little bit back up here toward the central Aleutians there, and then right up along the coastline, and 4,000 to 6,000 feet here, that upper level ridge shifting into Canada, warmest air aloft there, going with it, and icing. Look for some light to very isolated moderate rime icing here for the northern Panhandle, North Gulf Coast, and really due to that trough swinging through, areas of light icing mixed or rime here for south central, or coming up across Cook Inlet, Susitna Valley. A little more widespread up here, but nothing too serious, nothing much in the considerable moderate category. And with that system here coming into the eastern Aleutians, Alaska Peninsula, could see some considerable moderate rime icing with that. And for the jet stream, good southwest flow here, pushing that next system right on in, and a trough into the west central interior areas, 9,000 feet. Pretty good winds south of the area here, the Aleutians, with this low center, but still 40 to about 60 knots there from the central into the eastern Aleutians, 40 for the Alaska Peninsula, and 3,000 feet, 35 knots for the Alaska Peninsula, 10 to 15 over the interior. Easterlies as high as 40 knots, eastern Arctic coast, and the southeast coast 10 to 20. As far as turbulence goes, not too bad, really pretty smooth there for the Panhandle, the eastern interior, still for some moderate chop here. Western Brooks Range on the lee side, and also for the eastern Aleutians and Alaska Peninsula. And after the break, I'll be back with a look at the marine forecasts.
Floating hundreds of miles from Earth, astronauts get a unique perspective of our planet. While they might recognize landmarks, space is the only place they can see the very edge of our planet's atmosphere.
From orbit, particularly looking at the horizon, did bring to mind how thin the atmosphere is. It's like an onion skin around this great big ball of the Earth.
This uppermost layer of Earth's atmosphere, the ionosphere, also overlaps with the very beginning of space. It's the job of NASA's new mission, GOLD, the Global Scale Observations of the Limmendisk Instrument, to study this region, a region that isn't just for astronauts to explore, but that affects humans every day down on the ground. For one thing, this layer of the upper atmosphere helps protect us from harmful radiation and energy emanating from the sun. But in our modern society, it does so much more. It affects the smartphone that sits in your pocket and the radio waves that guide our airplanes. The ionosphere is a crucial layer of the atmosphere through which our communications and GPS signals travel. And when this region changes, it impacts those communication signals. Changes can occur above this region from the sun's activity, also known as space weather. Changes can also occur below from Earth's weather, such as hurricanes and wind patterns. GOLD connects the dots between how space weather and Earth's weather shape the upper reaches of the atmosphere. But this region isn't easy to study. The ionosphere spans roughly 60 to 400 miles from Earth's surface, which is too high for aircraft and scientific balloons, and the lower regions are too low to easily study with satellites. What are attainable, however, are the swaths of red and green light shining out from the upper atmosphere. Formed when the sun's rays hit atmospheric molecules, this light, named airglow, comes from green and red bands of glowing gas. Some of the airglow is invisible to our eyes, shining in infrared and ultraviolet light, which can only be seen with scientific instrumentation. Taking advantage of our planet's natural glow is gold. The gold instrument, which is about the size of a mini-fridge, is hitching a ride on a commercial communication satellite, SES-14. The satellite's orbit lies 22,000 miles above Earth, where it can record images in ultraviolet light to monitor changes in airglow across the globe. These images give information on the temperature, density, and composition of particles in the upper atmosphere. Gold collects these observations faster than any mission has ever done before. It captures an image of Earth's entire disk every 30 minutes, allowing scientists to see how the upper atmosphere evolves throughout the day. Gold joins a host of missions studying the very nature of space, around Earth, the Sun, and planets. As NASA ventures farther and farther from home, knowing the nature of space itself is crucial for our journey to understand our solar system and beyond.
There's a new class of chemical compounds impacting the Earth's ozone layer and raising concerns among some scientists. But a new NASA analysis indicates stratospheric ozone could actually be impacted more by climate change and the continued release of already banned chemicals. The Earth's ozone hole is showing signs of recovery, decades after the landmark agreement called the Montreal Protocol that banned many chemical compounds harmful to the ozone layer.
So we know the Montreal Protocol was a huge success. This was signed in the late 1980s when scientists and policymakers from around the world gathered together to try to save the ozone layer.
The chemicals they regulated persist in the atmosphere for many decades. They thin the ozone layer and they create a seasonal hole over Antarctica. They basically take away part of our planet's natural sunscreen, and that increases the risk of skin cancer and damage to plants.
Scientists have projected the ozone hole could disappear almost completely by about 2075, but several factors could delay that recovery.
There are some industrial compounds that are not banned by the Montreal Protocol, but as they enter the atmosphere, they will also hurt the ozone layer.
But the unregulated compounds have a short lifespan in the atmosphere, unlike the chlorofluorocarbons that were originally regulated. So they have a short-lived impact on ozone, and we don't think they'll delay recovery by more than a few years.
We projected by 2050, more than half of the ozone-depleting compounds in the atmosphere will come from long-lived substances banned by the protocol.
Because these compounds stay in the air for such a long time, compared to the unregulated, short-lived compounds, they will have a disproportionate and lingering impact on ozone. So any non-compliance with the protocol can have significant consequences.
And the really big uncertainty in ozone layer recovery is climate change. There are many naturally produced ozone-depleting substances that are emitted by the oceans. And as the oceans continue to warm due to climate change, those emissions will increase, and that will further delay ozone recovery.
Scientists want to better understand how climate change will affect ozone recovery.
This is a hard problem. As a scientific community, we need to work on this major issue. We now have a powerful new tool to simulate atmosphere and its interaction with land and ocean to study this issue. And that's what we're going to do.
How can you see the atmosphere? The answer is blowing in the wind. Tiny particles known as aerosols are carried by the air around the globe. This visualization uses data from NASA satellites combined with our knowledge of physics and meteorology to track 3 aerosols: dust, smoke, and sea salt. Sea salt, shown here in blue, is picked up by winds passing over the ocean. As tropical storms and hurricanes form, the salt particles are concentrated into the spiraling shape we all recognize. With their movements, we can follow the formation of Hurricane Irma and see the dust from the Sahara, shown in tan, get washed out of the storm center by the rain. Advances in computing speed allow scientists to include more details of these physical processes in their simulations of how the aerosols interact with the storm systems. The increased resolution of the computer simulation is apparent in fine details like the hurricane bands spiraling counterclockwise. Computer simulations let us see how different processes fit together and evolve as a system. By using mathematical models to represent nature, we can separate the system into component parts and better understand the underlying physics of each. Today's research improves next year's weather forecasting ability. Hurricane Ophelia was very unusual. It headed northeast, pulling in Saharan dust and smoke from wildfires in Portugal, carrying both to Ireland and the UK. This aerosol interaction was very different from other storms of the season. As computing speed continues to increase, scientists will be able to bring more scientific details into the simulations, giving us a deeper understanding of our home planet.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back. Looking at coastal water forecasts here for the Panhandle. Small craft advisories for much of the coastline. Southeast 25 knots, seas running 9 to 11 feet. The south coast there along and off Prince of Wales Island, southeast 20 with 8-foot seas. Clarence Strait looking at winds from the southeast tomorrow at 15 with 3-foot seas. Pretty light for Stevens Passage, southerlies at 10. And Lynn Canal, southeast 15 with seas running at 3 feet. Moving on to Sunday, small craft advisories, Lynn Canal out of the south up to 25 knots and southeast 25, gust of 40 for Stevens Passage, but Clarence Strait staying light with southeast winds of 15. And south to southeast 25 knots for small craft advisories on the south coast. The north coast, south to southeast at 30 knots with seas running 10 to 11 feet. Prince William Sound tomorrow, look for east winds at 20 knots with seas running 4 feet. Eastern North Gulf Coast here, southerlies at 20 knots, seas running 11 feet there, and lighter southerly winds at 15 for the Western North Gulf Coast. West winds 15 to 20 knots with the 15-knot winds for the Barren Islands and the 20-knot winds out of the west for Kamishak Bay. Southwest 20, Southern Cook Inlet. North of the Forelands, winds will be south at 20 knots with 6-foot seas. And the following day on Sunday with that low tracking up, the low center up somewhere into Prince William Sound here, anywhere from Seward to Cordova. It should make landfall, but will definitely be falling pressures here. So northerly winds coming into Cook Inlet, 20-25 knots out of the north, strongest south of the Foreland seas at about 6 feet. Easterlies for Kamishak Bay at 25 knots, otherwise southwest 40, good gales there for the Barren Islands, southerlies of 30, well, south winds, gales for the North Gulf Coast, 35 to 40 knots out of the south. Prince William Sound, southeast winds at 40 knots with seas at 9 feet, the way it looks at this point in time. And for Kodiak Island, west-southwest winds 20 knots with seas running 5 to 7 feet there. And northwest winds here for Bristol Bay blow right across the peninsula out of the northwest 25. Both zones there, seas 7 feet from Sitkinak to Castle Cape. And then Castle Cape to Cape Sarachev, gales south 40 knots, seas 12 feet. Bering Sea side of the peninsula, easterlies at 35 knots with seas 11 feet. Outlook for Sunday, really strong winds, good full gales here for the Alaska Peninsula. Westerlies 40 to 45 knots, seas 14 to as high as 21 feet. And also 45-knot winds here from Castle Cape to Sitkinak, up the east side of Kodiak there, west 45, seas 21 feet. Gales, southwest gales for Shelikof Strait and Bristol Bay, west 45 knots. And for the western Aleutians, west of Kiska, southwest 25, east of Kiska, north 25, Adak and Atka, northeast 30 on the Bering Sea side of the islands, Pacific side, northwest 50 for storm warnings. Storm warnings also here. Approaching Unimak Island, full gales on the Bering Sea side of the islands there. And then for Sunday, Fox Islands west, 25 to 30 knots, more uniform wind pattern. Lighter 2s for small craft advisories. West 30 knots for the central Aleutians, 12 to 15 foot seas, and 30 knot winds from the west extend all the way out to Shimian at 2. Seas running 11 or about 15 feet. And for the southwest coast, here south of Nunivak Island, southeast 15, southwest 20 for the northern Bering Sea into the Yukon Delta coast, southwest 20 for St. Lawrence Island, east 25 for the Pribilof, seas 13 feet. And then for Sunday, hanging on to some northwesterlies at 35 knots here along the Yukon Delta coast, or the Kuskokwim Delta coast, south of Nunivak Island, otherwise west 20 for the Pribilofs, and kind of a variable pattern here. Northwest 10 along the Yukon Delta coast, south to southeast 15, northern Bering Sea, St. Lawrence Island. And for the eastern Beaufort Sea coast, east-northeast 15 to 20 to east 20 on the central coast, but full gales here. Big increase in the winds on the west side, all the way down to Cape Thompson, east 40 knots, and easterlies at 25 for the Chukchi Sea. Outlook for Sunday, much lighter winds here, Wales to Cape Thompson, southeast 15, and then easterlies at 25 knots for the central and west coast. 20 to 25 knot easterlies, so some brisk wind advisories for the eastern stretch of the Beaufort Sea coastline there. And for tonight, not too bad up there. Coastal flood warning ends there for the central coast at 6 p.m. Otherwise, snow, winter storm warning for the central interior around Tanana. Winter weather advisories farther to the north, and progressing up through Sunday, another storm coming into the North Gulf Coast.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.